It's one of the most painful and confusing places to be. When you're doing all the work, thinking all the right thoughts, repeating the affirmations, visualizing the dream life with every ounce of hope you can muster, and yet nothing's shifting. Or it's shifting so slowly it feels like the universe is teasing you, like you're just not doing enough, so you double down. You think more, try harder, script longer, force the feeling of gratitude, pretend to let go while secretly gripping tighter under the surface, and still, silence, delay, that same aching space between where you are and where you want to be. I know that space well. It used to feel like I was chasing a ghost, a future that always floated just out of reach, no matter how many times I tried to pull it into the now with my mind. But here's what I eventually had to learn the hard way. Manifestation doesn't happen through thinking, it happens through being. You don't manifest what you think about. You manifest what your body believes, what your energy signals, what your nervous system says yes to without flinching, what your frequency holds consistently, with no inner contradiction, no background static, no emotional misfire. And that requires a different kind of shift, a softer, deeper, more embodied kind, not louder thinking, but quieter presence. See, thought is electric, but emotion, feeling, is magnetic. And while your thoughts can direct your focus, it's your felt frequency that broadcasts the signal the universe responds to. And that signal doesn't come from mental effort. It comes from your identity, your state, your coherence. That's why you can think I'm abundant all day long, but if you're subtly vibrating with fear, with desperation, with lack, the signal is scrambled. That's why you can say I trust the process on the surface, but if your stomach tightens every time the phone doesn't ring, or your chest sinks when you see someone else get what you want, the universe hears that, because your true transmission comes not from your affirmations, but from your embodiment, from how safe the desire feels in your nervous system, from how anchored you are in the frequency of already having, not hoping, not reaching, not wishing, being. So let me ask you, how would you move if it were already done? How would you breathe if there was nothing missing? How would your voice sound if you didn't have to prove, perform, or perfect? That's the signal, that's the bridge, not force, but frequency. Not managing the outcome, but magnetizing it through resonance, like tuning a radio. It's not about building the station, it's about aligning to it. And anything that pulls you out of that alignment, the overthinking, the doubt, the pressure, the mental gymnastics, becomes static, interference, distortion, and this is where most people get stuck, because we've been trained to think our way into new realities, to use the mind like a weapon. But the quantum field doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to purity, to congruence, to felt knowing. You become the version of you who already holds it, and the world reorganizes around that signal, not because you forced it, but because you are it. This is the collapse of timelines, the folding of distance, the merging of self and outcome into one coherent field of now. Not someday, not maybe, now. But to do that, you have to stop trying to get, you have to stop chasing, you have to stop managing the quantum like it's a checklist, and start becoming the version of you who no longer doubts it, who doesn't just think the new identity, but embodies it in micro moments, in the breath between effort, in the softness after surrender, in the stillness that says, I don't need proof, I am the proof. Because manifestation doesn't start in the mind, it starts in the body, in the way you hold yourself, in the stories your cells repeat when no one's watching, in the emotional tone you default to when the world goes quiet. That's where it begins. And from there, everything flows. Everything aligns, everything accelerates, not because you're chasing it, but because you've become it. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when the energy inside you contracts, when you shift from presence into pressure, from embodiment into effort, from being into performing. Maybe it's when you check your phone for the 10th time, hoping they finally messaged, or when you repeat that affirmation one more time, not from joy, but from fear that it hasn't worked yet. That flicker, that grasp, is the moment your frequency fractures, not because you did something wrong, but because you left yourself. You abandoned the present moment to chase a timeline your nervous system doesn't yet trust. And that, right there, is where the distortion begins. Because every time we approach manifestation like a task, something to control, fix, manage, we activate the exact signal that repels what we want. Why? Because control is rooted in fear. It's the energetic language of lack, the invisible declaration that says, "It's not here yet, and I don't trust it will come unless I interfere." And the quantum field, like a mirror, reflects not what we pretend to believe, but what we actually signal. And that signal is clearest not in what we say, but in what we feel, in what we embody, in what we move from. It's the difference between reaching and receiving, between efforting and allowing, between urgency and openness. Think about it. Have you ever been around someone trying so hard to be liked that it actually pushed you away? That's what most people do to their manifestations. They try so hard to vibrate high that they end up vibrating off. They reach for gratitude like it's a ladder, instead of sinking into it like it's a ground. They try to convince the universe, instead of remembering they are the universe. And when you're trying to convince, you're still doubting, you're still separate, you're still waiting. But alignment is not about pretending you're already there. It's about becoming the version of you who no longer needs to pretend, who no longer performs for the outcome, who doesn't grip for proof because they've already merged with the signal. That kind of embodiment cannot be faked. It's not about the words. It's about the weight of them in your nervous system. It's not about how often you visualize. It's about whether you're coherent with the frequency of what you're visualizing. And coherence, true coherence, happens when your heart and mind and body are in agreement, when there's no static between desire and belief, when you're not just thinking about the life you want, but actually living in the emotional landscape of it now. That's what collapses time, not effort, essence, not repetition, regulation. When your nervous system feels safe with what you're calling in, when your body no longer flinches at the idea of holding it, then you're no longer manifesting from fantasy. You're manifesting from identity, from a new baseline, from a new default. And from there, the field responds not slowly but instantly. Because in quantum terms, reality isn't waiting. It's matching the frequency you are, not the fantasy you want. But this kind of being is not passive. It's deeply alive. Embodiment is not about doing less. It's about doing differently, moving from the signal of wholeness, acting not to get something, but as someone who already knows, someone who already holds. So the question becomes, can you move as if it's already yours? Can you exhale as if there's nothing missing? Can you let go of needing to prove and shift into choosing to radiate? Because the signal you send is not just in your thoughts, it's in your posture, your presence, the quality of your silence, the breath you take before you speak, the way you look at the world when you stop needing anything from it. That's what the field reads. That's what life organizes around. Not your effort to manifest, but your ease in becoming. You don't attract from striving. You attract from stability, from safety, from inner coherence that says, I know who I am. I know what I carry. I don't need to chase, because I've become the magnet, the living expression of the frequency I once sought. That's the power of true becoming. That's the edge where miracles unfold. Not in the pushing, but in the presence, not in the hustle, but in the hum. There's something deeply paradoxical about becoming, because in the moment you truly become what you seek, the seeking dissolves, the waiting disappears, the urgency lifts, and what's left is an unexpected quiet. A stillness that feels almost unnatural at first, like something should be happening, because for so long your nervous system was addicted to the chase, to the striving, to the high of hoping and the low of disappointment, to the roller coaster of almost there. Becoming feels strange at first, because it requires you to stop outsourcing your power to future events, to stop using the absence of the thing as a reason to stay out of alignment, and instead, to root into the version of you who doesn't need permission to feel whole. But this is the secret space where coherence is born, where reality begins to rearrange, not because you convinced it with force, but because your frequency became undeniable. Embodiment is not theatrical. It's not loud. It's not about faking confidence or pretending you're somewhere you're not. It's about a subtle, grounded, unwavering knowing, like a deep hum beneath the surface. The way you just know a flower will bloom when it's ready, not because you told it to, but because the conditions are aligned. You are the conditions. Your energy is the soil. Your embodiment is the climate. And when your inner world reflects the state of already having, not through mental tricks but through emotional congruence, then manifestation becomes inevitable. Because the quantum doesn't reward effort, it reflects coherence. It mirrors the energetic structure you hold, moment by moment, breath by breath. So ask yourself, What does my body believe right now? Not what I want it to believe, but what it actually knows as true. What's the emotional baseline I return to when no one's watching? That's the signal. That's the subconscious script. That's the root of your manifested life. Because if your thoughts are saying abundance, but your nervous system is still bracing for loss, the signal is mixed. And the field always responds to the dominant vibration, which, more often than not, is the one you feel, not the one you say. This is why nervous system regulation is not just a wellness trend, it's the foundation of manifestation. You cannot embody what your system does not feel safe to receive. You cannot hold what your energy still fears. So the work becomes safety, not success. Presence, not performance. You learn to exhale into the timeline you desire, instead of clenching in resistance. You learn to expand your capacity to feel good without waiting for proof, without the condition, without the outcome. That's embodiment. And from that place, things begin to move. Not always dramatically, sometimes subtly, quietly, like a shift in the air, a synchronicity, a softened edge, a sense of flow. Because the energy is no longer blocked by grasping. The signal is no longer scrambled by fear. You're no longer trying to get somewhere because you've arrived inside first, and then, without effort, the outside begins to catch up. Reality follows resonance, always. It's not about thinking your way there, it's about tuning your way there, like adjusting the dial until the music is clear, until you feel the signal in your bones, until every cell in your body is humming with the truth of, I already am. Not someday, not maybe, now. Even before the physical proof, even before the timeline crystallizes, because becoming is what makes it real. Becoming is the manifestation, and the universe has no choice but to match a coherent field. So the next time you feel the urge to force, pause. The next time your mind starts spiraling, soften. The next time you start thinking too hard about how to manifest, remember, you don't manifest by thinking, you manifest by being. And the more you rest in that being, the more you return to the version of you who was never separate to begin with. I remember the moment I realized I was no longer trying to manifest. I was simply living as if it had already happened. Not with arrogance, not with delusion, but with a quiet, grounded certainty in my body. It was subtle, almost anticlimactic. There was no dramatic shift, no fireworks, just ease, just peace, just the absence of that familiar tension, the grip, the chase, the subtle ache of not yet. I wasn't pretending, I wasn't visualizing, I wasn't scripting. I had simply become the version of me who didn't need to look over her shoulder anymore, because there was nothing left to chase, only something to continue being. And in that space, the world started to mirror me back, not because I had forced it, but because I had finally matched it. I had become it. And the moment that clicked, I understood what the teachings had been pointing to all along, that it's not about repetition, it's about resonance, that you don't have to manipulate the quantum, you only have to tune to it, and you tune through your emotional landscape, through your breath, through the choices you make when no one's watching, through the self you return to when you're not performing for your future. This is why identity is the axis of manifestation, because you don't get what you want, you get what you are. You get what your system knows how to hold. You get what you've emotionally acclimated to. So if abundance still feels foreign in your body, the universe will protect you from it, not to punish you, but because your energy isn't yet stable enough to sustain it. This is not about blame, it's about coherence. The universe is not testing you, it's matching you. And the more you stabilize in the frequency of already having, the more effortless the unfolding becomes. So how do you stabilize? How do you shift from wishing to being? You start small. You start in the in-between moments. You start by noticing the contraction, the way your chest tightens when something doesn't go as planned, the way your breath shortens when you imagine the worst, the way your thoughts spiral when the text doesn't come, the opportunity doesn't land, the money doesn't show. Those moments are not failures. They are invitations. Invitations to return to your signal, to pause, to feel, to choose again, and in choosing again, you rewire the pathway. You teach your system a new baseline, not by force, but by familiarity, by repetition of being, not repetition of thinking. That's how the new identity gets anchored, not in big dramatic leaps, but in micro moments of choosing the timeline you already belong to, of breathing like the person who knows it's done, of moving like the person who no longer needs proof to feel peace. You begin to let go of urgency. You stop monitoring the manifestation. You stop trying to make the quantum behave on your timeline, because you realize the moment you try to control it, you signal separation. But when you surrender, truly, viscerally, deeply, you collapse the distance, not by stepping forward, but by sinking inward. And from that place, the thing you were waiting for no longer feels like it's coming. It feels like it's here. And because your energy has made it real, reality soon will too. This is the paradox. The moment you no longer need it to come, it comes. Not as a reward, but as a reflection. Not because you proved yourself, but because you remembered yourself, that you were always the vessel, the magnet, the mirror. That manifestation was never about creation. It was about alignment. And alignment was never about effort. It was always about essence. So breathe, slow down. Notice where you're still performing. Notice where you're still holding your breath, waiting for life to begin. And come back. Come back to the version of you who already holds it, already lives it, already is it. That's the signal. That's the bridge. That's the power of becoming. There's a subtle, sacred shift that happens when you stop trying to get and start remembering you already are. At first it might feel like loss, like surrendering the thrill of the chase, letting go of that adrenaline rush that comes from constantly reaching. But beneath that loss is a profound liberation. Because when you stop reaching, you stop reinforcing the belief that you're separate from what you desire. And that belief, that you're not there yet, that you still need to fix, earn, improve, is the root of delay. Not because you're not worthy, but because that belief keeps you out of resonance. Imagine walking through a hallway of mirrors. Every time you glance around, you see reflections, not of who you wish you were, but who you're being right now. Your tone, your posture, your emotion, your expectation. The mirrors don't lie. They don't judge. They simply reflect. And the quantum field is no different. It echoes your internal landscape with astonishing precision, not your fantasies, not your surface thoughts, but your energetic blueprint, the frequency that pulses beneath everything you say and do. So when you feel like you're doing all the right things but nothing's showing up, pause. Don't just ask, what am I thinking? Ask, what am I being? What am I radiating in the silence? What am I holding when no one's watching? That's the manifestation. Not the vision board, not the journal, but the state, the signal, the self. And sometimes, the most potent shift isn't about doing more, it's about doing less, about releasing the rituals that became routines, about stepping back from the mental noise, about dropping back into your breath, into your body, into your now. Because the future you want doesn't live in some far-off moment. It lives in the frequency you choose to inhabit right here, right now. When you truly become what you desire, the world rearranges, the delays dissolve, the waiting ends. Not because the universe suddenly decides you're worthy, but because you stopped hiding from the version of you who always was. You stopped negotiating with your power. You stopped outsourcing your authority to signs, to numbers, to validations, and you started living as the source. This doesn't mean you never feel doubt, or fear, or contraction. It means you don't make those feelings your home. You don't let them dictate your signal. You don't spiral into proving. You breathe through them. You meet them with presence. You move with love. And by doing so, you anchor a new standard, a new normal, a new field. And from that field, magic feels like maintenance. Miracles feel like rhythm. Synchronicity becomes your native language. Because your internal world is no longer sending mixed messages. It's coherent, congruent, clean. And that kind of signal can't be ignored. It bends reality around it. Not with force, with frequency. So if you're wondering where your manifestation is, ask instead, where am I still postponing my being? Where am I still outsourcing my power to outcomes? Where am I still waiting for proof before I let myself feel it's real? Because that's the pivot. That's the portal. The minute you choose to embody the outcome emotionally, physiologically, vibrationally, you become it. And when you become it, it becomes you. The field has no choice. It's already done. Let this sink deeper, not as a concept, but as a breath. Let it settle in your chest where your wanting has lived too long. Let it unravel in your gut, where you've clenched for certainty. Let it expand in your heart, where truth has always whispered, you're not here to chase reality. You're here to collapse it into your presence. This is the power of becoming, quiet, fierce, unshakable, a signal the universe cannot unhear. It's in the smallest of moments that you'll feel the shift, not when the grand vision appears, but when your body no longer braces for disappointment. When you wake up and don't reach for your phone to check if it happened yet. When you notice that the air feels lighter, not because anything changed outside, but because something uncoiled inside, a grip released, a breath returned, a timeline merged. These are the moments that matter. These are the signs that becoming has taken root. Because true embodiment doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream, "Look at me, I'm healed," or "I've finally arrived." It hums, it glows, it moves through your system like water finding its level, smooth, certain, unforced. The mind may not even notice at first, because the ego is always looking for fireworks, but the body knows, the heart knows, the quantum knows, and in that knowing, life begins to shift around you, as a response, not a reward. Here's the truth that breaks the loop. You don't need to wait for evidence to believe. You need to believe so fully, so quietly, so coherently, that evidence has no choice but to arrive. Not because belief magically creates, but because belief shapes identity. And identity is what magnetizes. You become the embodiment of the timeline you desire, and then, without warning, that timeline becomes the only one available to you. Think of it like tuning into a different station. The music was always there. The frequency always existed, but you couldn't hear it until you matched it. Not with longing, with resonance, not with force, with familiarity. So the question is never, "How do I get what I want?" The question is, "How do I become the version of me who already lives this?" Not someday, but now. Not through strategy, through surrender. That surrender, by the way, is not passive. It's one of the most courageous acts you can choose. To surrender control, to surrender outcome, to stop managing manifestation like a project and start living as if the result has already woven itself into your fabric. Not just thinking about abundance, but feeling safe in abundance. Not just saying, "I am love," but moving through your day as if love is the atmosphere you breathe. This is where identity becomes frequency, where embodiment becomes magnetism. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent, not in action, but in alignment. In integrity with the timeline you claim. It means when fear arises, you don't collapse. You pause, you regulate, you remember, you return, again and again and again, until returning becomes your resting place, until alignment is no longer an effort. It's your essence, and from that essence you begin to see the signs, not because you're searching for them, but because you've become so clear, so centered, so true, that the universe can't help but respond in kind. A chance encounter, a sudden opportunity, a shift in someone's tone, a door opens without you knocking. This is not magic, it's mechanics, the natural consequence of a coherent signal. You no longer chase outcomes, they orbit you. You no longer beg for signs, you are the sign. You walk through life not waiting for miracles but recognizing them everywhere, in the quiet, in the flow, in the effortless arrival of what once felt distant. And all of it stems from one sacred shift. You stopped thinking about it, and you started being it. So ask yourself, can I hold the frequency of already having even when nothing outside reflects it yet? Can I stay loyal to the timeline I've chosen, even in silence, even in delay, even in the void? Because that's where timelines are born, not in the visible but in the vibrational, not in the proof but in the presence. And your presence, anchored, embodied, coherent, is the most powerful tool you have. There's something profoundly intimate about living as the version of you who no longer needs to become, who no longer scans the horizon for proof, who doesn't ask, "When will it come?" because they've already decided, "It's here, I am it, there's nothing to wait for." And in that decision, reality bends, not because you commanded it, but because you attuned to it. You collapsed the illusion of separation by embodying the frequency that dissolves distance. This is the frequency of trust, of enoughness, of coherence. And coherence is not just a spiritual idea, it's a physiological reality. When your heart and brain and body are aligned in a state of safety and expansion, your electromagnetic field becomes stronger, clearer, more magnetic. You begin to transmit a signal that doesn't just speak, it sings. And the universe doesn't just hear it, it dances with it. It responds to your state with precision, not emotionally, energetically. It's not personal, it's vibrational. So if you're not seeing the manifestation, don't assume it's far away. Assume your signal is inconsistent. fragmented, interfered with by doubt, fear, control. These are not moral failings. They are energetic disruptors. They distort your coherence. They pull you out of the field of I already am and back into the spiral of what if I'm not yet? And from there, the mirror reflects the fragmentation. But every moment, every breath is a chance to return, to choose the signal again, to root back into the beingness that says, I am no longer waiting, I am remembering. I am no longer searching, I am stabilizing. And when you stabilize, life becomes an echo of your embodiment. Not all at once, not always dramatically, but consistently, precisely, elegantly. The people who seem to magnetize everything effortlessly, they're not special, they're steady. Their signal is clean. Their energy is safe. Their nervous system trusts what they're calling in because they've made it familiar. They've normalized the feeling of having instead of rehearsing the feeling of not having. That's the difference. That's the pivot. That's the practice. And yes, it's a practice. A daily, hourly, breath by breath returning to the self you choose to be. It means catching the micro moments when you shrink, when you grip, when you doubt. And rather than spiraling, you soften, you pause, you breathe. You ask, what would the version of me who already holds this feel right now? And then you become that feeling. You embody that version. You let the emotion lead the identity, not the other way around. Because here's the truth. Emotion is the access point. It's the bridge between thought and matter. It's the translator between intention and manifestation. And when you anchor the emotional tone of the life you want now, not in fantasy but in felt reality, you become the embodiment of that life. And life can't help but mirror it. It's not about positive thinking. It's about energetic safety. Can your body hold the vibration of joy, ease, wealth, love, without flinching, without sabotaging, without pushing it away? That's where the work lives. That's where manifestation begins, in expanding your capacity to receive without resistance, in allowing goodness to feel normal in your system, in removing the subconscious conditions you placed around your worth. And as those conditions fall, as that resistance melts, what was once far away begins to feel close, inevitable, obvious, because you've become the version of you who doesn't chase the future. You inhabit it, you walk it, you breathe it, and in doing so, you collapse the timelines. You end the waiting. You remember, I was never separate. I only forgot how to be what I already am. And now as you sit here, wherever you are, however far you feel, I want you to know, you're closer than you think. Not because the manifestation is almost here, but because the version of you who has it already exists. She's not a fantasy. He's not a future self. They are present in your field, right now, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be embodied, waiting for you to stop asking, how do I get there? And start whispering, I am here. This is the most beautiful truth I know. You don't need to earn your desires. You need to acclimate to them. You need to teach your system what it feels like to hold joy without fear, to rest in enoughness without guilt, to feel safe in success, in intimacy, in peace, not just for a moment but as a baseline. Because when your baseline shifts, your entire reality recalibrates. And it's not about controlling every thought or hacking your vibration. It's about creating energetic coherence. A state where your body, your beliefs, your emotions, your actions all speak the same language. That language might sound like this. I already am. I already have. I don't need to perform. I don't need to prove. I only need to align. In this space, you stop using effort to force outcomes. You start using presence to open timelines. You begin to see that time was never the enemy. It was simply reflecting your resistance. And as resistance softens, time collapses. Miracles move faster. Not because you chased harder, but because you became clearer. Becoming is not about striving, it's about allowing. It's about remembering the frequency of who you were before the doubt, before the conditioning, before the fear taught you to shrink. It's the version of you who feels joy for no reason, who dances without needing music, who trusts without needing evidence, who loves without holding back. That is the version of you who manifests without effort, because their signal is pure. Not perfect, but honest, embodied, aligned. And so let yourself feel it now, right now, not someday, not when the bank account changes, not when the person texts, not when the path becomes visible, but here, in this breath, in this body, in this sacred now. Because this now is where all timelines collapse, where all manifestations meet, where all potential begins to crystallize. Feel the texture of having, the ease of holding, the relaxation in your chest, the softness in your belly, the warmth of knowing, and not in your head but in your being. Let that be your compass. Let that be your prayer. Let that be your proof, because once you become it, nothing can stay away from you. Not because you chased it, but because you made it true. So stop trying to think your way into the life you want, and start being the version of you who already lives it. Not with effort, with essence. Not by reaching, but by resting. Not by managing, by magnetizing. Not by adding more, but by returning again and again and to the truth that never left. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. And what you are is ready, now, always, completely.